Lundgren was born in 1944 and raised in Lake Cowichan.
In 1962, I entered the woods for the first time as an 18-year-old, and I went to work at Hillcrest Lumber Company. My dad most likely put in a good word for me. He worked in the camp. I had all brand new gear. I was shiny as heck when I went out there. And we went to work. And it was pretty trying for a kid that had never worked before in his life. One of the questions that always sort of pops up is, well, what about safety training? Well, there was none. The only training I had was a massive billboard that said, "Be safe," and that was right at the entrance to the camp. No instructions how to be safe, but be safe. And it took years and years and years later when I finally figured out how to make a place be safe. And it's not just a sign. Well, I think that anybody that entered into the forest industry, regardless of who it was, health and safety started on day one. And it was through the crews that you worked with. Somebody yelling at you, "Don't do that, because if you do that, this will happen." And that's how you learned. It was rough and tumble. And that was really how safety was kind of launched, I think, in my mind at the time.
As time went by, safety started to become more formalized in some companies.
In the late 1960s, I went to work at a new camp, Kaikus, and that was my real introduction to what a formalized safety committee was like. And I was absolutely amazed by it. Everybody in that camp went through the same formula. And that was the start for me. I had no idea that you could actually have safety meetings at that level.
Al soon discovered that not all companies looked at safety the same way.
First time I went up the coast, I thought I'd turn back the clock 100 years. I mean, there was everybody was looking out for themselves. To go from a culture where you had everything to where you had nothing, you basically were, your back was against a wall. And to try and encourage the one that had nothing to go somewhere was extremely difficult sometimes. One camp I worked at, the owner of the company came in. It was a small operation, and he said, "We need to have a safety representative." And there was 4 fallers. I was one of them, and I was the youngest. And they said, "Well, let Lundgren be the safety rep then. He's the young guy." So I accepted. I didn't realize I was the total safety committee for the entire operation. That was quite an intimidating introduction.
In 1980, Al was working at a logging camp in Renfrew.
I allowed myself to stand as a safety committee member, and the newly elected chairman came in and he sat down and he said, "I've been chairman for many years now and I've had enough. I quit. It's up to you guys to find a new chairman." And through impatience on my part and nobody wanting to stand, I let my name stand. The next thing I know, I was chairing the safety committee and representing 360 odd people, and I had never done anything like this in my life before.
In the late 1970s, disabled faller Jerry Crisell was working on a report on injuries within the logging industry.
And in 1980, he brought out his research, and it shocked everybody because he was able to determine that a rough estimate of the number of active fallers from about 1960 to 1980 was roughly about 1,500 men. Well, then when he looked at how many people had been either fatalities or permanently disabled during that same time period, he came out with a number that was just about 1,500.
The report proved that there was a 100% statistical chance of being injured if you worked as a faller between 1960 and 1980.
I think that the industry, the union, and WCB all panicked all at the same time because nobody had ever really looked at it seriously before. And it was at that point they decided that they were going to have to come up with some form of training program to be able to capture this and get a hold of it, get control of it.
The industry reacted by forming a tripartite committee representing the WCB, logging companies, and the IWA.
And I had an opportunity to sit on the lower committee, which was made up of fallers and bullbuckers, to put the core materials together for a faller training program. Eventually that was turned over to the upper committee to debate, and they took one look at it, and the company says, "We're not going to put that kind of money or investment into training anybody," and they left the table.
On November 14, 1985, Al learned at a personal level just how dangerous the industry still was.
Driving down Camper Creek Hill, my partner and I were just going home from work. I was driving the Crummy, and a call came out on the radio that we needed some help, and it was immediate, and it was an emergency, and somebody was hurt. And we raced up there, arriving on scene, got out, and we discovered one of our good buddies and falling partners was dead. He did everything absolutely right. He had perfect cuts, and he ran on his escape trail. He was 20 feet from the stump when he got struck. And it was an awful, awful day. One that is with me constantly.
In 1990, another failed attempt was made at developing a faller training program. Then in 2000, with new WorkSafeBC regulations in place, another attempt was made.
This was going to be the third attempt at building a faller training program, but this one had teeth behind it because it was in regulation. So away we went, and it became a mountain of work. I'm incredibly proud of it, and the results were outstanding. In 2007, not one faller was killed or permanently disabled in the forest industry in BC. An amazing record.
After the success of the faller training program, Al also contributed to a supervisor training program and a chainsaw safety program. All three have become industry standards.
I think if there's any kind of a legacy to think back on, it's that I had an opportunity to work with some fantastic people who encouraged not just me, but everybody else that happened to be there at the time to do our best. And when it comes to as far as safety was concerned, to explore it, to look right into it, find out what the real core problems are and how can you break it down so it can work for everybody. And if that can be somehow left as a legacy, then okay, so be it.